Hey guys, Rudy here. I really wanted to go over what Matt talked about in his last presentation regarding what Christians think. What Christians think is the one way, as he put it. And it's a very good question. I appreciate it as a Christian, right? As a big thinker, quote unquote. So a lot of Christians will say, and Matt's completely on point about this, a lot of Christians say there's only one way to get into heaven, I guess. I really don't know what they mean, to be honest, because every person's different. And in general, when somebody says Jesus is the only way, they mean like the only way into heaven or whatever. But I can tell you what I personally believe, speaking for myself as a Christian. I don't think like the typical Christian. You all already know that. I've gone over this actually on my own channel plenty of times. I'll put links to that. One video in particular, I believe, it's where I made the claim. In the thumbnail, it says the Bible is the dead word, or the Bible is a corpse, or something along those lines. And I go into a little more detail who I think Jesus Christ is. But I guess I'll just do another presentation on it. I don't mind. Because I got my perspectives hasn't changed overall, but I think I'm able to put it into words better. And the worst part about attempting to explain something like this is it's hard to find the words to communicate, because it's like, this is spiritual stuff, and it's really hard to put words into spiritual topics, because words are very limited. I've talked about this too, where you can only say one word one after another, while all the while the spiritual is more of a feeling. It's more of a mystical in a way. It's a direct connection to God, and that's impossible to put into words. And that's why Jesus had to speak in metaphors. He had to speak in parables, and even then his dumb disciples, his dumb followers, didn't understand him. This is probably going to be the same thing. I'll be speaking in tongues. To anybody out there who doesn't understand what I'm saying, I'm speaking in tongues. All right? So just leave it at that. Don't even try to intellectualize it, because it's not worth it, in my opinion. But I'm going to read the comment that I left first, and then I'll elaborate a little bit on the things I meant. From me on Matt's video, I'll put a link in the description as well to that, with a timestamp. Christian here. I would never ever claim nor tell anyone that Jesus is the way out. I know a lot of Christians think that. I do not. Jesus was the perfect man, or at least the closest to perfection that we have had walk the earth. All human beings will walk and do walk the same path because they do not have a choice. All people have to bear the cross, walk with it, and then the world will nail them to that cross and watch them die. Jesus' own people did this to him and watched him die. His friends and family did nothing about it. I've said it plenty of times on my own channel. Your own family will betray you, gaslight you, and pathologize you. What Jesus went through is what all people go through in their lives. On this premise alone, everyone walks the path of Jesus. Lots of dumb Christians mistake this and worship him instead of worshiping God. They pray to Jesus and repeat dumb, meaningless phrases from the Bible, not having a clue what they mean or what they're actually saying. The Bible is man-made and cannot be trusted, especially not something to live one's life by. The word, quote unquote, his word with a capital H, is etched into our hearts the moment we're born. Matt, this is why you say things and other Christians tell you that the Bible says that. It's already within you. I've heard your story for so long, and you were walking the path of Christ all your life. You had no choice. All people are Christians and do not realize it. This is why there is only one true path. It isn't Jesus himself, but rather the path he walked that we all go through. As for the go into the light or don't debate, I don't care. I have this life to live. I'm not going to spend it worrying about such meaningless topics. And I do really mean that. I can give a quick example for that last little bit. I've talked about Karina a lot, y'all. And when we first met, I told you about the thing with her father, and she didn't like me for a little while. She kind of put distance between me and her. And long story short, she ended up back on my shift, and we got to talking some more. And she asked me something very strange. And I guess this is the typical Christian thing to ask. This was like 2 years ago, guys, so it's been a while. Maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. She asked me if I can remember correctly. She asked me if I wanted to go to heaven or something along those lines. And I was really, really taken aback because I don't know how to put it. I don't mean this in some I'm better than you kind of way. I really don't. I was taken aback because it seemed so it seemed so intellectual. Like it seemed like no bigger thinking involved in a way. And something inside me just told me to say, don't answer that. Like immediately, the moment she said it, something inside me said, don't answer that. Just don't answer that. Don't answer that. I don't know. It was so weird. So I didn't answer that. I just said, I don't know. I just said, I don't know, which I didn't know at the time. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And I slept on it the next day, came along, time for another shift, right? And it hit me. It hit me out of the blue. I was like, the reason I couldn't just say yes or no is because I feel as if this experience is meant to be. Like, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for my families. And to say something along the lines of I want to get into heaven would be admitting that something may be wrong with that life, with my life, which there isn't. Like, even if things are going badly at times, it's like the chips are where they are, right? Like, everything is in perfect order in that way. For instance, I've talked about my father before, and he died when I was 5. He died right in front of my eyes. I watched him have the stroke that killed him. And for the longest time, up until I was like 34, so I spent almost a good 30 years being an atheist the moment my father died. And it's like, he died for a purpose, and he died for me to be right here speaking to y'all, if that makes any sense. And that's what I mean by, so that kind of covers that, the last thing about going to the light or don't. As for anything else, you guys, I believe my comment speaks for itself. What I wanted to say, I basically covered in that comment, but I can elaborate just a tiny bit, just to make this video a little longer, I guess. Is this topic, it gets brought up a whole lot, especially lately, at least in my circle, my fractal, my active circle, whatever you want to call it, where the topic of is Jesus God gets brought up. Because a lot of Christians, and way too many Christians think that Jesus is God, and I don't believe that at all. Like, I do not think that Jesus is God whatsoever. He's just a man. He was a man, the perfect man that has ever walked the earth. And metaphorically, he represents a lot of things. He represents the ego. He was the scapegoat, the straw man. The ego is the big one, to be honest. The crown of thorns represents the thoughts, etc. But Jesus was just a man who just walked the earth like anybody else. He had familial issues. He had issues with his friends, his family, his cousins, his little disciples that followed him around, his followers. All a bunch of dummies, all a bunch of snakes in the grass. And he understood this and loved them anyway. He was the example that we should all be. Meaning, having the understanding that we're going to deal with people you're going to deal with people who backstab you, who are snakes in the grass. Your family is toxic. I did a whole presentation on that, of how you need to love them anyway. Your mother and father, they divorce and they get remarried and they put you in the middle of the custody battle, or whatever the hell. They make you go, to the grocery store with them. They make you steal the loaf of bread, or just whatever the hell. And you need to love them anyway. You're going to love them anyway. And this is exactly what Jesus went through in his times. we are not any different than the kind of people in the Old Testament. We're still the dirty, low down apes, if that makes any sense. I'm not trying to put people down. I'm just using the descriptor as a way to grab attention. So the low down dirty apes, and that's who Jesus was dealing with. He was dealing with animals, essentially. Like the Canaanite lady I talk about, he literally called Canaanites dogs because that's how they acted. They were the people they were the no-gooders. And Jesus even proves that he can have his mind changed. The whole story with the Canaanite lady is very, very significant in that way, because even when Jesus was sure of himself, he got proved wrong, and he just changed his mind like it wasn't a big deal. Like with the Canaanite lady who came back at him about the parable about it wouldn't be right to feed the dogs the bread that belongs to the children. He's essentially calling the Canaanites dogs, and his knowledge is for his people, in other words. And the lady was like, even the dogs will eat the crumbs off the master's table, which is exactly what Jesus needed to hear to change his mind, because he's like, oh, I see. Like, you can see. Like, you're a seeker, you're a truth seeker. And I understand that, and his mind changed. Jesus realized in that moment that it wasn't about being a Jew, it wasn't about being a Canaanite, it was about seeking other seekers, if that makes sense. And that was his purpose, and that's your purpose, that's my purpose. Attempting to seek other seekers, if that makes sense, truth seekers. And the whole deal with the Christianity thing is being the one way, at least I interpret it. I've already explained it in my comment, but I'll reiterate it a little bit, is that once you wake up and once you forgive, that's the big thing. Once you forgive your family, you forgive your parents, you forgive your mother for mistreating you, for gaslighting you, for pathologizing you. Once you forgive, it's like your whole world changes. It's like you realize that your whole life has been manipulated by these spirits, by these specters, like a ghost hanging over you. Like when I forgave my father, I felt reconnected to God, and later, like 2-3 years later, I forgave my mother, and it's like, boom, that was the mic drop. It's like it was over. I didn't need any other explanations. It was that then and there that I realized that all people are going through the things that I went through. And it all boils down to forgiveness. And I know a lot of people don't like that because they think forgiveness is weakness. But it's not. It takes more strength to forgive than it is to stay angry. Because it doesn't take any effort to be angry. It really doesn't. Like if you're just an angry, miserable person, that takes zero effort. Everybody's angry. So it's like, that should be your clue that it doesn't take much to be angry. Like, period. But like I said, once you see it in that way, and like I said, I'm speaking in tongues because you're not going to understand what I'm saying, unless you go and forgive your parents. Go and forgive the people who did you wrong. Forgive the people that were low down and trifling and backstabbing. Like once you forgive them and understand that they're going through the same things you went through, you'll see it that way. You realize that all people, every single person, you'll realize that every single person on this planet is walking the path of Jesus Christ. They all have to bear their cross. And not only that, at the very end, the biggest tragedy of all is that they're going to be nailed to that cross. I'm going to be nailed to that cross in the end. And I will cry out to God. It's going to happen. The man that had the most faith still cried out to God at the end. Why have you forsaken me, right? The man with the most faith. He's not God. He's the living ego. We're the living egos. We're going to be nailed to a cross. It's happening. And Jesus' story was there to show us what can and will happen. You have no choice but to walk that path. That's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say that's the one way. Because you don't really have a choice. It's like the determinism, right? No free will. Absolutely, determinism. It's like you have no choice. You're done for. But it's wonderful. Like it's like a breath of fresh air, like an exhalation. Anyway, guys, I think I made my point. If you've lasted this long, thank you so much for your time. Matt McKinley, I hope you're listening. This video is for you specifically, obviously. I hope maybe there's a little more understanding about this whole Jesus Christ Christianity thing. And if not, well, like I said, I'm speaking in tongues, so goodbye.